Hello, welcome to Arise News. You're watching the Global Business Report. Rhoda Sudir here. We're in Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital, and we're going to head over to Grenada for the 4th annual Africaribbean Trade and Investment Forum, which commenced yesterday, uniting leaders and representatives from African and Caribbean nations to explore deeper economic connections and trade partnerships. Hosted in St. George, the forum is a pivotal gathering aimed at embracing shared histories and aspirations for mutual growth. Take a listen to remarks of Dr. Didacus Jules, who's the Director General of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Commission, and Dr. Terence Drew, who's the Prime Minister of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Esteemed Prime Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, President Orama, our gracious host Prime Minister, Deacon Michel, and illustrious colleagues and friends, protocol being voluminously established. Let me just say, in relation to the remarks made by our colleague who just spoke, that gap, that vacuum about data on trade between the Caribbean and Africa is not an accidental thing. It was structurally engineered. And I think it speaks to the importance of what we're doing here, that we're able to cast light on that. It starts with a consciousness of the reality in order to transform it. So I want us to imagine a world where a student from Dominica begins her studies in Grenada, spends a semester in Nairobi, interns at the Africaribbean Bank in Cairo, then returns home to build a startup that connects rural farmers in the OECS single market to markets in Lagos. That world is no longer a distant dream. It is within reach, and it begins with the decisions that we have been making here this week. So, yesterday we bore witness to what unity of purpose looks like. African and Caribbean leaders, entrepreneurs, and financial architects under one roof, exchanging not just business cards, but bold ideas and real commitments, as we've heard earlier. The energy in this room and the sincerity of our conversations makes one thing clear. We are no longer talking about possibilities. We are committed to activating them. We stand at a defining moment. And this isn't just about trade, it's about trust. It's not only about investment, it's about identity. For us in the OECS and the wider Caribbean, it is about scripting a future of relevance with Africa as our co-author. Day one laid that foundation. Today we build upwards with intent. We've seen deals inked in energy, logistics, finance, and manufacturing. But an implicit narrative in yesterday's discourse is that economic resilience is incomplete without cultural self-definition and systemic innovation. The orange economy is not a niche, it is a pillar. It is our response to the question, what do we export when the soil no longer carries more sugar or bananas? At the OECS, we've been crafting the OECS Orange Economy Development Strategy, and Grenada, by no accident, has been at the core of this, focusing on sectors such as film, music, Esteemed Prime Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, President Orama, our gracious host Prime Minister, Deacon Michel, and illustrious colleagues and friends, protocol being voluminously established. Let me just say, in relation to the remarks made by our colleague who just spoke, that gap, that vacuum about data on trade between the Caribbean and Africa is not an accidental thing. It was structurally engineered. And I think it speaks to the importance of what we're doing here, that we're able to cast light on that. It starts with a consciousness of the reality in order to transform it. So I want us to imagine a world where a student from Dominica begins her studies in Grenada, spends a semester in Nairobi, interns at the Africaribbean Bank in Cairo, then returns home to build a startup that connects rural farmers in the OECS single market to markets in Lagos. That world is no longer a distant dream. It is within reach, and it begins with the decisions that we have been making here this week. So, yesterday we bore witness to what unity of purpose looks like. African and Caribbean leaders, entrepreneurs, and financial architects under one roof, exchanging not just business cards, but bold ideas and real commitments, as we've heard earlier. The energy in this room and the sincerity of our conversations makes one thing clear. We are no longer talking about possibilities. We are committed to activating them. We stand at a defining moment. And this isn't just about trade, it's about trust. It's not only about investment, it's about identity. For us in the OECS and the wider Caribbean, it is about scripting a future of relevance with Africa as our co-author. Day one laid that foundation. Today we build upwards with intent. We've seen deals inked in energy, logistics, finance, and manufacturing. But an implicit narrative in yesterday's discourse is that economic resilience is incomplete without cultural self-definition and systemic innovation. The orange economy is not a niche, it is a pillar. It is our response to the question, what do we export when the soil no longer carries more sugar or bananas? At the OECS, we've been crafting the OECS Orange Economy Development Strategy, and Grenada, by no accident, has been at the core of this, focusing on sectors such as film, music, immersive technology, fashion, and literature. Our goal is to foster a new class of creators and cultural entrepreneurs co-producing with African counterparts. Think Afrobeats meets bouillon and dancehall. Highlife and soukous meets Dennery segment. Blacks from Senegal, a combination of African rhythms with jazz and funk, finding fusion with Caribbean jazz. Think feature films that traverse Lagos and St. George's, telling stories of our shared resistance and triumph. Think streaming platforms showcasing Antiguan poetry and Nigerian comedy side by side. Visualize, and this is something we actually have been discussing with Martinique, a Creole comedy festival cultivating laughter between Francophone Africa and the Creole-speaking populations of the Caribbean. This is not sentimentality. It is economic strategy with soul. Through EC Innova, which is our regional innovation framework developed with the OECS Robotics Association that is actually residing in St. Kitts and Nevis. We are mobilizing the next generation of inventors and entrepreneurs. This initiative will provide micro-grants, mentorship, training, and link OECS youth with African tech hubs and capital. Here, the Creative Africa Nexus, CANEX, and Africaribbean Bank's innovation instruments can play catalytical roles. We envisage Caribbean startups mentored by African tech accelerators, joint pitches at CANEX and Active, and innovation not just in labs, but in everyday life, in how a Vinci farmer markets breadfruit flour, how a teen builds a virtual reality experience of a Kalinago village. So let me pose a challenge in terms of reimagining tourism, which is another huge sector of opportunity. What if, instead of promoting our islands individually, we created a single Caribbean Africa cruise itinerary with a cultural passport? As a cruise line that treats the Caribbean, not as happens now with the Western cruise lines, not as bus stops in paradise, but as journeys of discovery, navigating the geography of our identity, exploring the symmetries of our culture, building a new brand of tourism, not as explorations of curiosity, but as odysseys of consciousness. Or imagine virtual journeys through our heritage, rainforests, reefs, and rituals, developed by our youth, virtual journeys developed by our youth, powered by African capital, and monetized globally. We are working on this because when borders shrink, possibilities expand. Allow me to quickly point to 5 under-leveraged, high-impact opportunities that we see for Africa-Caribbean partnership. One is agribusiness and food security. Africa has 60% of the world's arable land. The Caribbean imports more than 80% of its food. Together, we can reshape global food systems through land-based investments, agro-processing, and supply chain integration. The second is institutional trade frameworks. Yesterday, we agreed on the importance of establishing an Africa-Caribbean Commission. Within that architecture, we need a joint Africa-Caribbean trade facilitation mechanism to harmonize policies, enable tariff alignment, and build shared regulatory ecosystems. The third is connectivity infrastructure. The charter flight that brought many of us here is a symbol. Now we must scale this through digital corridors, port linkages, and logistic networks, enabling billion-dollar trade corridors by 2028. Fourthly, joint access to development finance via Afrexim Bank, the African Trade Center in Bridgetown, and mechanisms like the Bridgetown Initiative, also the Nature Bank. We must unlock climate finance, concessional capital, and diaspora bonds. And fifthly, diaspora capital and networks. The diaspora, we keep saying, is our 6th region. Let us therefore mobilize its entrepreneurial, academic, and creative power as a unifying force between continents. The agreements proposed yesterday are the skeleton. The cultural and technological collaborations we forged today are the arteries, the muscles, and the heart. We need to go beyond transactional engagements, co-create value, co-own platforms, co-author a new chapter of South-South economic diplomacy. Let us move forward with urgency, not in panic, but with purpose. The North is distracted. The South must rise, and rise together. Welcome to day 2, and let's make it count.
Dr. Didicus Jules, thank you very much indeed. Before we move on to our opening address, let us just remind you of exactly what was achieved yesterday, and we have a video to summarise that for you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Africaribbean Trade and Investment Forum 2025.
And we are proud to host Active 2025. We open our minds and our hearts to the partnership, to the dialogue, and to the conversation about economic prosperity and ultimately the dignity of African people everywhere.
Grenada provides the calm and serene environment required to concentrate our minds on the important issues that confront us today as a people.
Duty is what has brought us here to this city of St. George's. A duty dictated by our rejection of the state of world affairs.
Today we continue to live, or to rather to give life to the vision of a global Africa.
fabulous day one. Absolutely amazing. And so we move on to our opening address, and we're honoured to hear from the Prime Minister of the Federation of St Kitts and Nevis, the Honourable Dr. Terence Drew. Welcome.
Good morning, all. It's a pleasure to see so many of you here this morning after such an active first day. But it shows that the energy of what we came here to do is propelling all of us. Allow me to recognize the Honorable Prime Minister of Grenada, my brother, Honorable Deacon Mitchell, and also to recognize, sitting right next to him, President of the Africaribbean Bank, President Benedict Orama, and also to recognize other esteemed heads of state and government, if they're here. Allow me to recognize as well the Director General of the OECS, Dr. Jules, who you just heard from. His address was indeed pointed and inspiring. Put your hands together for him. Leaders of industry, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, and the residents and citizens of this beautiful island or islands of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. It is indeed an honor for me to have the opportunity to address this remarkable gathering at the 4th Africa-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, a forum that has grown stronger, more impactful, and more essential with every edition. Its very existence is a shining testimony of our shared resolve to reunite the African and Caribbean peoples through trade, investment, innovation, and purpose. The theme, Global Africa, Uniting for Prosperity, is both timely and transformative. At this moment in history marked by global uncertainty, shifting power dynamics, and rising demands for equity, this calls us to action. It reminds us that our destiny is not to remain on the periphery of global trade and development, but to stand together at the center of a new global paradigm, one that reflects our strengths, our values, and our aspirations. We as governments carry the responsibility to shape the environment where opportunity flourishes. We must be bold enough to tear down the bureaucratic and physical barriers that separate us, and be visionary enough to build bridges of commerce, culture, and cooperation. And that is why I agree with Mr. Aliko Dangote. This is not hard. This is doable. What it requires is clarity of vision, consistency of purpose, and collective will. Let me share what is possible when these ingredients come together. Just about a year ago, following an investment summit in Bastille, St. Kitts, I met with the leadership from Aquarium Consult, Ms. Aisha Mina and her team. As a result of that, in just months later, I was on a direct flight with a contingent to Abuja for Caribbean Africa Investment Summit in Abuja. On that trip, I had the opportunity to meet many of the business shakers and movers in that city and across Nigeria. I even had the opportunity to visit with the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And in our discussion, we discussed how we can tangibly connect Africa and the Caribbean. It was a very fruitful and successful discussion. I then issued an invitation to him to the region. He said to me that he would come to the region. Months later, he was on a visit to St. Lucia, where he met with leaders from the OECS. I want to thank the President for standing on his word. But it didn't stop there. Just after having visited Abuja, Nigeria, putting on an African-Caribbean forum with a private sector entity. This is why the private sector is so crucial and important in all of this that we seek. We had a return event in St. Kitts and Nevis, where an earpiece, one of the largest jets that ever landed on St. Kitts, came with scores of people from Nigeria, which included business people, people in government, government officials. We even had sports members or members of sport teams, those who were from the cultural sector. And in St. Kitts, there was a real fusion of the cultural expressions of West Africa with the cultural expressions, in this case, particularly St. Kitts and Nevis. A fusion that was so seamless that really speaks to our relationship building, that it can be as seamless as their bodies move, as they integrate cultural expression from one area with another. We also had a football game. We had a team from Nigeria. They played against the St. Kitts and Nevis football team. No need to say who won the game. But again, you see the young people battling on the field. The African continent meet the brothers of the Caribbean in an exhibition football game. And there the Nigerians brought their drums and they brought their way of how they celebrate football. And there those from St. Kitts, the Kittitians, celebrated how they celebrate football. And again, it was so natural and so seamless that out of that game, I'm sure that relationships have been formed that will be forever. Again, demonstrating that it is not difficult, it is really possible and can be done. And if that could have been done between us, imagine what all of us can do together. But not only that, as St. Kitts, we have Nevis, we have also fostered academic and technical exchange with institutions such as the Open University of Tanzania, and the Prime Minister was here. We have also forged relationship with the Technical Vocational School of the University of Kenya. These connections are preparing our youth not just to witness change, but to drive it. I say all of this to say that it's already happening, and we are here to ensure that we accelerate the process. But what I would like to say is that this has opened up avenues between the Caribbean and Africa. As I said, traveling to Africa must be as normal and accessible as traveling to Europe. Our people must be able to book a flight in any part of Africa and return within the same week. No visa hurdles, no complex routes, just connection between our peoples. St. Kitts and Nevis has already opened its doors to Africa. Now we need to build open skies, open seas, and open systems that allow for seamless travel, trade, and exchange between the continent and our region. The current level of Africa-Caribbean trade is far too low and was pointed out by our gracious host. But this is not a weakness, it is potential. There's only one direction from here, and we all know what that direction is. That is up. Africa has the people, it has the land, it has the resources. What we need now is the political courage and the operational know-how to transform that potential into shared prosperity. Let this be the century where global Africa rises, not just in rhetoric, but in results. Let us not be daunted, for in the early 20th century, the Honorable, His Excellency National Hero of Jamaica, Marcus Garvey, formed the UNIA and built a company called the Black Star Liner, whose objective was to link Africa to the Caribbean. At that time, there were no presidents in the room, there were no prime ministers in the room, there were no major banks in the room, there were no independent countries in the room, and he did this at that time. So if he did this at that time, with the whole world against him, just imagine, now that we have presidents in the room, prime ministers in the room, major banks in the room, and independent people in the room, what can we do as we forge this relationship with them? This is why I fully support the commission proposed by President Orama. And yesterday, we were all moved by the practical wisdom shared by elder statesman P.J. Patterson at lunch. This commission, if done well, can serve as the vehicle to help accomplish what we seek. Thus, the upcoming AU CARICOM summit in Addis Ababa must be remembered not for its speeches, but for its deliverables. With a combined market of 1.6 billion people, we have the numbers, we have the talent, and we have the momentum to make history, to make our history at this particular time. We stand ready. St. Kitts and Nevis has already signed 3 agreements with Africaribbean. Well, 2, we'll sign the 3rd one today, 2 of which involve private sector investments. 2 of which involve private sector investments. Our size has never defined us. As I often remind colleagues, Singapore is no bigger than St. Lucia. It's not about landmass. It's about leadership, partnerships, and strategic execution. These islands once propelled the economies of Europe, not to our benefit, but to our detriment. Let us now do it for us. We must not only view the Atlantic as a passage of pain, but begin to see it as a bridge of opportunity, a bridge of commerce, a bridge of culture, and a bridge of collective renewal. Today, allow me to pay homage to President Benedict Orama, my brother and a partner on this path, one of the great visionaries of our time. I remember vividly our private meeting in Barbados after the public session. Only 2 heads of government were present, myself and another head. But your words were enough to shift paradigms. You touched me in a particular way with your clarity of thought and vision. And the very first agreement I signed as Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis was with the Africaribbean. And the very first country to sign an agreement with the Africaribbean was St. Kitts and Nevis. That is the level of faith that I had, and that faith has grown. What you have achieved, books will be written about. You have not only laid a foundation, you have built a legacy. Put your hands together for President Orama. And to the incoming president, I've had the honor of engaging with you. And I am filled with hope. Your passion, intellect, steady resolve reassure me. And I am confident that you are the right leader to carry the torch forward. So let us welcome, he may not be here, but let me acknowledge him. So as I bring my remarks to a close, let us therefore unite as one people, not as scattered states, but as one global Africa, bound not only by ancestry, but by ambition. Let us build the Atlantic Bridge and step boldly into a future defined by our own vision. This is our time. The march has begun, and it cannot be stopped. Let us all join in. Thank you very much, and I wish this success.